What's good? It's your boy Toneavii. Thanks for being with me, man. We about to do some crazy stuff here. We about to get into some crazy information. As I'm learning, I'm hoping everybody's learning together with me. This information has blown my mind. It has definitely blown my mind. But some things we definitely need to get into and kind of touch bases on a deeper understanding of what is Tartary, what is America. What all does it have to unfold for us? So we're going to be reading from this book that's wrote by R.S. Clymer. It's called Oriental Masonry. And I found some things in here that I thought were very interesting on page 25 under Mystic Masonry. Okay, so what it says right here is the cradle of symbolism used in all masonry is placed by many of the best authorities in that country which they believe was first inhabited, i.e. the Plateau of Tartary, and from there transmitted to this generation by the sages of India, Persia, Ethiopia, and Egypt. We are not indebted to either ancient Egypt for either religion or masonry, but to America. Again, I repeat that. We are not indebted to either ancient Egypt for either religion or masonry, but to America. It is a fact that at Memphis, Egypt, in the pyramids, under the guidance of the kings. What kings? The three kings? We talking about Prester John? What kings we talking about? The mystic rites of masonry were worked many thousands of years ago, but at this time, Egypt and the continent of America were one and the same. Again, I'll repeat that. The mystic rites of masonry were worked many thousands of years ago, but at that time, Egypt and the continent of America were one and the same. Okay. It goes on to say, in America, rediscovered in the 15th century and repopulated in the 17th, was recovered Egypt and the Promised Land, or the land of the constellation of the Eagle. What constellation is that? That's the constellation of Aquila, the Aquila constellation. Okay. It goes on to say, no matter how numerous or complicated the works of a lock may be, if but the right key be applied, the Great Pyramid proves to be the long-sought key to the mystery at once of mythology and of the great world religions. Especially interesting is it to Americans in this year of the Columbian celebration of the 400th anniversary of the rediscovery of America to see it demonstrated that the cosmic terrors, interwoven with the very warp and woof of all sacred literature, whether Christian and pagan, refer to occurrences as literally true as the earthquake of Lisbon. These stupendous events being connected primarily with a great destruction and recovery of equilibrium in the solar system, and secondly, with the consequent wrecking of the continent of America when the globe became involved in the consequences of the disorder of the skies. America, known to the mystic as Atlantis, when the ruin befell, was the seat of the greatest empire that has ever existed, and its irresistible armies were terrorizing all Europe and Asia. So as you can see here, it gets really deep in relation to what the Masonics speak about within their own knowledge base or their secret society, right? And you got to remember too that R.S. Clymer is a Rosicrucian, and the Rosicrucians are a secret order that is before Masonries. They held the secrets and passed the secrets down before Freemasonry was even thought of. All right. It goes on to say, study of the American constellations Scorpio, Sagittarius, and Capricornus reveals the immemorable antiquity of the name of America and the significance of the arms of the United States. The fact once recognized that it is impossible to separate the eagle from America, the land overshadowed with wings of Isaiah, over which accordingly appear two grand eagles, the red swan flying down the Milky Way, and the winged steed Pegasus and Iguales, all the wings known to astronomy, without taking the bear from Russia, Perseus from Persia, and a flood of light is poured upon the history and mythology. And where, heretofore, much has been vague and inscrutable, now we are able to at least to see men as trees walking. When following the course of the constellations, those immovably and perpetually fastened upon America are reached, it will appear that, while all that is sublime in the historic past centers upon Egypt, all that is sublime in the prehistoric past centers upon America, or Atlantis. And as the curtain, which has hitherto concealed the prehistoric connection between the peoples of ancient Egypt and of America, is lifted, it will be seen that the people of the eagle on the Nile, being descended from the original people of the eagle on this continent, the twain are one, and that prehistoric America was the original Egypt, or Eagle Land, prior to the mighty dispensation in the days of Peleg, when the earth was divided, and the great globe itself was nearly rent asunder. Do you understand that? Are you listening? Are you grasping the knowledge that is being placed forth, despite everything that you've been taught? Retain the knowledge of what is true and held from what they call the profane, okay? Says Agassiz, firstborn among continents, America has been falsely denominated the New World. Hers was the first dry land lifted out of the waters. Hers was the first shore washed by the oceans that enveloped all the earth besides. And while Europe was represented only by islands rising here and there above the sea, America, parentheses, Atlantis, already stretched in an unbroken line of land from Nova Scotia to the far west. America was evidently peopled from the old continent, because there were only 8 persons saved at the deluge. The principal part of their posterity during the whole of the first century after that event occupied the very center of Asia. Some say that America was peopled by the Carthaginians, who possessed the Cape Verde Islands, which are only 3 weeks' sail from that continent. Their ships, having women and children on board, might miss the intended islands before the invention of the compass. And if so, they would inevitably be driven by the trade winds to the coast of America. Okay? Now, it goes on to say here that others, judging from the similarity of some religious rites, have conjectured that it was peopled by the 10 tribes at the dispersion of Israel. Some think it received its population from China or Japan. Others that it was colonized by some wandering tribes of Japhet, who penetrated into the trackless regions of North America by the Straits of Asia. Some have been bold enough to assert that America was not inundated at the deluge, and that consequently the Aborigines were antediluvians and the most ancient people on earth. Others suppose that there were few individuals preserved on this vast continent at the deluge, that it might be without difficulty repeopled. And we are told that America was peopled after the deluge, at the time, as it were, communibus aliis, with other parts of the earth equidistant from the spot whereupon the ark is acknowledged to have grounded. From the grand division of the eastern and western hemispheres through the natural effect of causes operating from the deluge did not take place till about half a century after that event, and thus a subject that has uniformly puzzled the most learned historians and philosophers, and given ground for the most elaborate dissertations, namely, the manner by which America was peopled, appears to be made simple and easy, as are all those questions that are submitted to the ordeal of truth. The infallible attestations of Holy Writ. Robertson supposes the Americans to have derived their original from the Asiatics, and supports his conjecture by some ancient traditions among the Mexicans, which ascribe their primitive population to a horde from a remote country to the northwest, whose gradual progress from the northern coast, where they landed, to the interior provinces is distinctly traced. Okay, so he goes on to say here, from what people soever Americans descended, or in whatever manner that vast continent was originally furnished with human beings, it is certain that the first inhabitants brought with them a system of mysteries which they applied to the purposes of religious worship, and through this system, in process of time, was almost entirely lost amongst the scattered tribes which led an erratic life in the deepest wilds. Yet many of the truths on which it was founded were preserved in a deteriorated form by the two great nations which had planted themselves on each side of the Isthmus of Panama. Now he goes on to say here in number 14, of this there can be no doubt. The pyramids were built by Atlanteans long centuries before Egypt was a civilized country. Why then were they built in Egypt instead of on some part of what is now America? Because Egypt was then the center of the earth, and the Atlanteans, with their vast knowledge, sought the center, for that will stand for as long as time. Now, since there's been a lot of talk about Tartary, and we just mentioned the fact that America was the plateau of Tartary and was known to the mystics as Atlantis, let's talk about Tartary and what's going on, right? Let's dive into this, and let's go into some depths in which some other people have been talking about, such as 432, the drop, carnival drops. But I haven't heard from some of my other people maybe talk about. So we know that Grand Tartary was in America, especially North America. I think that's appropriate to say. And since it's been a lot of talk about Tartary lately all over the place, we know that this was an advanced civilization and that it's been suppressed by the powers that be. Now, Tartary on old maps is in Asia, near Russia, okay? You can see that here. Now, what if America was Asia Major and Moscow, which is capital of Russia, was in North America by Francisca, or France? This evidence could prove that America was the Grand or Superior Tartary. Now, we could start by going into great detail by proving that the Americas is the Orient, the East, and Asia Minor. But we're going to go into that a little bit deeper, and I got some great content for that we're going to drop, okay? Now, first off, where is Russia? Well, here is a 1562 map of America by Spanish cartographer Diego Gutierrez from the Library of Congress. The 1562 Diego Gutierrez map shows Francisca, France, and the mythical golden city of Nuremberg, or Nuremberg, that was allegedly built by Vikings. This said map also shows you Moscow, the capital of Russia. Russia, Rus, Asian, right? Clan Rus, or OS, Rus, RUS, or Andros, Andrews, in North America. Well, so much for Nuremberg being a myth, because it had to be real for it to be on an authentic map from the Library of Congress. Yes, the original French were the Franks, Clan, Ross, Rus, Andrews, Andros, and they were French Mars, Blackamoors, Moors, aka Berber, Merovingians, okay? We can touch base on that at a later point, okay? Now, this also explains why you have a French quarters in Louisiana, and they also refer to themselves as Acadians, okay? You can spell that Acadians or Akkadians, Akkadians. Now, Russia was established by the mighty Andros, Rus clan from Scotland when they were Saracens, old Arabs, which explains all the black Russian icons in the Islamic State flag of Russia, Asian, with its cherry red background and Islamic crescent moon and star. Grand Tartary was in North America due to the sheer number of the world's fairs. Okay? The Americas was once so great that the powers that be had to hold several world's fairs in North America just to explain away the evidence of a pre-advanced civilization and their tech. For example, the Americas had the Pan American World's Fair, the 1876 Continental International Exposition, the Panama, California Exposition, the Golden Gate International Exposition, the Tennessee Centennial Exposition, the Chicago's World's Fair, the St. Louis World's Fair, the Jamestown, Virginia Exposition, the Panama Pacific International Exposition, the 1895 Cotton States and International Exposition, the Alaska Yukon Pacific Exposition, no place in the world had this many expositions, aka World's Fair, which leads me to believe that the Americas was not only India Superior or Asia Major, but also the superior Grand Tartary, Egypt, Sumer, Babylon, Jerusalem, etc. And this was just also reinforced by what R.S. Clymer just said in his book, which was that America was the plateau of all of Tartary. So Tartary or Tartaria is one of the greatest civilizations that was ever suppressed by the powers that be, since this was an advanced Blackamoor civilization with free energy tech, modern tech, and fabulous Gothic and Greco-Roman architecture. For an example of what I am referring to, and to get a glimpse of how Grand Tartary looked like, you can go into detail about the 1936 Texas Centennial Exposition in Dallas, Texas. This proves that the Tartarians had free energy, beautiful Gothic and Greco-Roman architecture, and it proves that most of our technology comes from Grand Tartary, even the automobile itself. As King Solomon or Sol-Amon said in the Bible, "It is nothing new under the sun," which is a true old proverb. In a book by David McRitchie named Ancient and Modern Britons, on page 406, he says, their manner of levying a money tax upon the vanquished was precisely that of the Black Huns in Italy many centuries before, and it is unnecessary to emphasize the fact that they scalped their enemies like the modern Red Indians. The Tartar features of these Black Danes are visible again and again. The word Tartar being used as it was done when as black as Tartars was a proverbial expression. End quote. Now that we know that the Danes were Tartars, do we have evidence to confirm this? Yes, we do. Here is an image of King Frederick II of Denmark and Norway, and his daughter, Queen Anne of Denmark. Denmark was named after the Danes, who are the tribe of Dan, the original nobility of Europe. Even the original Celtic Black Vikings, Thornhall the Great, Thorvard, Thorfinn the Great, were Black Vikings in Norway, Sweden, Iceland, Denmark, etc. Now, I know you'll get confused about this because we've already seen, or as you'll see on the screen now, Caucasians is a term that has been misrepresented. But when the Caucasians came out of the Caucasus Mountain and traveled further up Europe, evidence mentions that they saw giant black people who were Askamani or Askanmani, which means Ashmen, and Blumain, black people with a blue tone. Now, of course, in winter times when black people don't moisturize their skin, they go Askamani, which is gray in contrast. Here you can see King Frederick II of Denmark in Norway. Of course, look how blue, black, or gray he is. Denmark and Norway is, of course, Viking country. You see, the truth is all in the artifacts, or art. Well, so much for the white Viking hijacked. His daughter, Queen Anne of Denmark, married King James of the Bible. And of course, yes, King James was black as well. How do you explain a black king ruling over a Viking territory? Keep in mind, this is recent, so this requires a lot of explaining for any white Europeans that claims that the Vikings and the Tartars, or Tartarians, were white. Now, of course, there are several images and people who have researched the original black nobility. Notice here of the painting of King Frederick II. You will see Gothic architecture, castles, and cathedrals, which is a Tartarian or a Moorish mode of workmanship, according to the master textbooks, quote, a dictionary of the architecture and archaeology of the Middle Ages, unquote. Yes, the Tartarians, Moors, built all the castles and cathedrals throughout the world, which became college universities, since Gothic building is a Moorish style of building. The cathedral is built with a Gothic, Moorish, or Islamic type of building, and so is Westminster Abbey. Again, in a dictionary of the architecture and archaeology of the Middle Ages from John Britton, you'll notice that it says, quote, in Turner's Normandy, Volume 2, page 250, are delineated several sculptural spandrels from Bayeux Cathedral exhibiting somewhat of the Moorish or Tartarian mode of workmanship. The word is spelled spandre, in the French contract for reforming Westminster Hall, unquote, dated 1393. Now, this is a powerful quote coming from a master textbook written by a white author that is recognized. Well, it appears that the Moors built the castles and cathedrals throughout Europe. Now that we have a number of sources to confirm that the Tartars were blackamoors, we have the Gothic architecture, we have the written evidence from authors, and we have the actual paintings of Tartars from that time period. But what about all the advanced Tartarian tech? Well, the so-called black people invented over 90% of the world's inventions. So, the people with the most inventions are descendants of the Tartarians.